I started, I think it was Thursday, seems so long ago already, when I talked about courage, and suddenly there was this little light and wow about spontaneous courage with the drivers here in India, and the last speaker about doing and being, because it means that courage is in your being. It's not switched off. It's not something you sort of take out and you use now and again. But thank you to all the other speakers this morning. It was just a privilege listening to you. The tea bag was fascinating, and so I think maybe I would link to what I'm saying to what you've said, and to Karen who said that maybe big victories have been won in the world, but there are so many small victories that we still need to win, and that is absolutely so. That is absolutely so. I'd like to start with a story and end with a story and in between something else. In creativity, in the science of creativity, there is a concept called essence. Kind of one of those things that fascinated me, essence. Creativity specialists will tell you that you cannot solve any problem. You cannot get to the right solution if you don't understand the essence of your problem. Otherwise, you'll keep on spending money and waste your time and whatever. You may get to solutions that won't work because you've never understood what is the essence that you're dealing with. I'm going to start off with a story that a very good friend of mine by the name of Duke Rowe told me. Duke Rowe is a head of a cancer hospital in Houston in Texas, a remarkable leader. It's the hospital where the cancer patients live longer than in other hospitals. Remarkable. It's a leader that creates life. And he shared the story with me. I don't know where he got the story from. I kind of think it's a friend of his that he was talking about. A friend of his, a widower, person in his late 60s, lost his wife 10 years previously, living alone. His one son was working somewhere else in the US. And one day, during one weekend, he decided that he would sort out his attic. And so he started to clear up the attic, and then he found a whole stack of diaries that his son wrote while his son was at school. They encouraged at school, and he also, as a parent, encouraged his son to keep a diary. So he thought this would be interesting now. So he took the stack of diaries, and he carried it downstairs to the dining room, and he put it down on the floor. And then he went to his own diary. He was also a guy that kept diaries. And so he was kind of reading what his son wrote on certain days and what he wrote on certain days. And so here it was a Saturday morning, let's call it the 10th of March, 1990. And what he wrote in his diary was, my son woke me early in the morning and asked me, Dad, can we go fishing? And he said it was a terrible day, that he was writing, terrible day, wind was howling, it was raining outside, and he wanted to sort of sleep a little bit later, but his son kept on nagging, and eventually he went with his son, with his 10-year-old son, he went fishing. And he said the whole day they were trying to fish and caught nothing. And then he ends his little diary, little day that he writes, this day was a complete waste of time. Then he opened what his son wrote, the 10-year-old son. His son also wrote, went fishing with my father. Spent the day next to the river trying to catch fish. Last line, it was the best day of my life. It was the best day of my life. You see, if you miss the essence, you basically miss everything. My family, my father and my mother was the first leaders that I can recall. Very, very special people. Very special people. If I could have the brain on the screen, my mother, in a sense, represented the left brain. She was this focused woman. This focused woman who created discipline, who set the goals, was well organized. She, in a sense, created that kind of environment. Very caring person. A woman of wisdom. My father, on the other hand, represented the right brain. He was unorthodox. He was testing the boundaries. He was going to the edge. He was a very, very famous sports person in South Africa. I remember during the evenings when we were at dinner, sitting around the table, mother, father, sisters, brothers, my father would suddenly get up and then he would do 4 somersaults in the kitchen. And then we would sit down again, and suddenly he would do a handstand on the chair. And in a sense, you know what it did to us as children? He said, try the edges. Go for it. Risk. And what we started to do, we took the cups and the glasses, and we started to build and see who could get to the ceiling first. And sometimes it broke, and we took raw eggs and threw it to one another over the table. You see, it was this kind of balance of the discipline, the order, the organization, but both caring and excitement, and the other side, in a sense, the imagination, go for it and try for it. And what they did as leaders, and I think this is what leaders should do, they created an environment. I really wish I had the time to talk about this, what we call above, below the line model. But they created an environment that was always above the line. Not once, until he died a few years ago, did my father ever say anything negative about another human being, ever. I grew up in that kind of environment. It's just negativity was never there. Critical thinking is, but not negativity. So it was up here. Our thinking and our feeling was here. It was positive, it was passionate, in a sense courageous. Never here. That was the first leaders I knew, were my parents. But then in another sense, and there may be a bigger and a huger sense, 2 leaders that I was very close to the action. 2 leaders, and the 2 bags in the cup, and maybe many bags that South Africa needed to become a new country. Was on the one hand, Nelson Mandela. Look at the brain again, the right side of the brain, the Imagineer. He saw the dream. For 27 years, it never wavered. He saw the images of a new world, a new country, and a man of immense forgiveness. I remember the interview that one of the American presidents had with Nelson Mandela, and they kind of asked the question, why don't you hate the people that put you in jail? And he was astounded by the question. Because you see, forgiveness was in his being. It was a strange question to him, because he responded by saying, you don't understand, do you? If I still hate them and curse them, they still control me. I forgave them. I'm free. I'm liberated. And so in the one sense, the Nelson Mandela, the amazing human being, the forgiveness person. And on the other side, the balance that you needed to create a new world and a new country, F.W. de Klerk. A person I knew well. In those years, I spent time with him in the sort of turning years. He was the pragmatist. He said left brain. He was the realist. Realized that, you know, you got to let go. You got to say goodbye. You got to say goodbye. He was the organizer, and in a sense, the strategist. So it's amazing if you look like my mother and my father, who presented a whole brain in creating an incredible environment for us. I think those 2 leaders, in a sense, who both were awarded the Nobel Peace Prize, created a world. There were other leaders too. There were many, many bags in our cup in South Africa. I alluded to that on Thursday. It was very fascinating if you understand our history and why so many other parts of the world do not get peace, but why we got peace. It's because in South Africa, every chair was filled around that table. Every chair was full. Every leader that needed to sit around that table, and there were many, there were 11, I believe, that sat around that table. There were unbelievable stories of leaders who later joined, but eventually they sat around the table. Every chair was full. You see, in the world where you do not have peace, the Middle East, everywhere, because there are always empty chairs. There are always empty chairs. You will never have peace. In South Africa, there were so many bags in that cup. But the 2 leading bags created an environment. And you know what was so wonderful about Nelson Mandela also, as a tea bag, he knew when to leave. He knew exactly when to leave. It's not like so many leaders who kept on, no, left, flag left. I'll never forget, I had hosted a TV talk show for about 3 years called Creativity. And I I had FW, before that I actually was asked to train Nelson Mandela's staff of about 50 people. Marvelous to spend time with him. And I remember asking, we talked about where do you think is Mandela's dominant part of his brain? And they all said, what we call R2, the bottom right. That's his number one. The caring, empathizing, gentle human being. Because you see, if it's in your being, like in his being, it's like he walks through his office in the morning through the gardens. He would then stop and talk to the gardener. Not about his work, but about his family. See, that's the single being. But I remember F.W. de Klerk when he was a guest on my program, and I asked him, what do you think is your greatest quality? And he immediately responded and said, courage. He said, when I got up and had to say goodbye to 100 years of history of apartheid, I had to get up and say that. I knew that immediately thousands of lives would be my back. But let me end over the story with, I'm condensed to, I like the time, don't worry, and I like the time for me. But let me end with a story, which I think, in a sense, looking at great leaders, looking at what we need in the 21st century. I'd like to share with you a very personal experience. A few years ago, we have a house in Cape Town, the sea, and a couple of days before Christmas, late afternoon, my neighbor came to me and said, listen, come out with me on my boat. Beautiful afternoon. If you know the Cape Town, it's amazing, amazing place. So we went out on his boat, and we were 6 of us, and my one son was with us on the boat, and we were right there in the middle of the ocean somewhere. I turned to him and I said, listen, we're not wearing life jackets. Don't you think we should wear life jackets? He said, no, look at the sea. It's so smooth and beautiful. But he hardly said those words when suddenly, that's what the sea does, it just exploded around us. And the waves became like mountains, started pounding us. And when the third wave hit us, we totally capsized. We were all trapped underneath this boat. It's a terrible, terrible situation. Eventually, we all got out under the boat. How? I don't know. Because the waves were really coming down on us in the middle of the ocean, nowhere. And it's interesting, the first thing you want to grab, you want to find an anchor. You want to grab onto something. But the boat, there was nothing to grab onto. And as the waves were pounding us, we began to drown. And you can imagine drowning, and you know your son is drowning with you. And as something happens in your brain, and I believe this was the last time that I would go down. You get that feeling, you've got nothing left. You would go down one more time, maybe come up one more time, but that's it. So when I came up, that was, I believe, the last time. Someone shouted, there's these boys, there were 2 of these boys drifting in the ocean, about 100 meters. How they were, we didn't see them. And how we got there, I can't tell you. There was no way that we can explain it in any logical way. But we got there, kept on holding onto it. The waves were pounding, and we were dying again. And suddenly we heard a boat coming. Long story, and we were saved. Eventually we got to the shore, and we were lying there on the sand. Couldn't move. It's strange. You can't even lift your fingers. And the man of the Red Cross just knelt over me. Said, where we saved you today, we have never saved anyone before. You received a miracle today. And then I knew it. That we must never stop believing in miracles. Our leaders must never stop believing in miracles. Because if you stop believing, it will not happen. I've had that experience of a miracle. And I can truly say it is out there. We need, in 2030, miracles sometimes to make this a better planet. Thank you very much.